Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming along today. Hopefully we can make the Trinity talks great again. And thank you very much to Dr. Watson for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. What you have on the screen in front of you is a wide summary of the kinds of qualities that we would expect to see in someone aspiring to be a President of the United States. We would expect them to have a consistent and coherent political ideology. We would like them to have a basic understanding of the major issues of the day and what role they can have as the President in influencing them. We would like to assume that they would have a stable and loving family life, that they exemplify those good family values. That they would be a decent human being, that they would be a normal human being, that they wouldn't be doing things that we would assume would be odd or strange or out of line with what we think is normal. We would think they have a strong sense of faith and morality. And I think one of the biggest differences between us here in Australia and the United States is that sense of faith being such an important precondition for political leadership. We also want them to be mature and have gravitas. They are the most powerful person in the world after all. We would like to assume that they have that presence. And we'd like them fundamentally to be honest people. Does anyone want to take a wild guess at how many of these qualities we think Donald Trump has? One? Anyone want to take another guess? Eddie? None. So the man who meets absolutely none of these criteria is currently the man who is leading the Republican nomination for the presidency and arguably is the second most likely person to succeed Barack Obama to become the next president of the United States. And to give some background about what Trump has done to defy all of these expectations we might have. For example, as a Republican, he believes in the idea of a single government-funded healthcare system. Anathema, that would be totally inconsistent for any other politician. We would like to think that someone who's trying to run to be president would understand how the nuclear weapon systems work. And for Trump to suggest that the South Koreans and the Japanese should have nuclear weapons to sort the situation out with North Korea is vastly inconsistent with what we would usually expect. He advocates for an idea of shutting America off from the world for the purpose of influencing and improving their economic situation. For a man that aspires to be the president to have been divorced multiple times, with allegations of those marriages not being the most wholesome of affairs, it questions his sense of family values. We've also just got that sense of common decency, and probably the thing that has engaged most of you in Donald Trump's rise to prominence are some of the most outlandish statements he has made over the last year of his quest for the presidency. The ones that stand out for mine are the fact that he mocked John McCain, the Republican nominee in 2008, for not being a war hero because in his opinion, war heroes don't get caught. He also has this obsession with critiquing women on their looks. For example, Carly Fiorina, who was running against him last year, or someone like Megyn Kelly, who was a journalist on Fox News. We like to think that they have a strong sense of faith and rationality and morality. And Donald Trump, in multiple interviews, has said he is not the kind of person that has felt the need to ask God for forgiveness. Now, anyone who knows anything about America knows that they are, by and large, a very faith-driven country. And honesty. There are too many situations to count where he has demonstrated a complete lack of honesty. So the thing that we have to ask ourselves is, how does this man with all his inconsistencies, how has this man become one of the most likely people to become the next president? And what I'm going to argue today is that a unique combination of events and factors have led us to this point. Now, we may argue that it all began on August 4, 1961. And that happened to be the birth date of Barack Obama. Now, does anyone know what is the link between this and Donald Trump's rise to prominence? He kept asking for the birth certificate. Donald Trump led what was known as the birther movement. Because as president, you need to have been born in the United States. Donald Trump's argument was, we haven't seen Obama's birth certificate. We're going to say he was born in Kenya or somewhere else. That means he's disqualified from the presidency. So in 2011, Donald Trump was leading this fervent movement demanding Obama release his birth certificate to prove that he was born in Hawaii and that there was not some decades-long Islamic/African/communist conspiracy to install Obama in the White House. And Obama responded in a very classy manner, and it led to quite a public shaming of Trump at a Washington event in 2011 where Obama effectively denounced Trump to his face in front of 1,000 guests and tens of thousands of people watching along. So this fueled in Trump that sense of resentment with Obama, that he had such publicly shamed him for a man that has built up such an image of being a winner. Meanwhile, the Republicans are trying to work out who they're going to nominate to try and beat Obama. They decided Obama needed to be stopped at all costs, and they decided that that man, Mitt Romney, was the guy that was going to do that in 2012. But he failed. He failed to make the case to the American people that Obama did not deserve a second term. In the end, Obama won the second term quite comfortably because he articulated a vision, backed up by his success in his first term, that he deserved another 4 years. Whilst that's been occurring, though, the Republicans have had success not at the presidential level, but in the congressional level. And these two individuals here, John Boehner and Mitch McConnell, the leaders of the Republicans in the House and the Senate, have had quite prominent positions. But they have failed to follow through on the policies that won them the votes in the first place. They have been advocating for things such as drastically reducing the immigration intake, cutting taxes on a rampant scale. But the practicalities of American politics mean those things cannot get done that easily. So for the Republican base that have put their faith in these men, they've felt let down. All the while, you've got this president that is despised by so many people and loved at the same time, fundamentally changing the largest country on earth. This photo here is of President Obama signing into law his healthcare legislation that as of this year has provided health insurance to over 10 million people and is arguably his single greatest achievement as president. So we've got this political climate at play. So the billionaire developer and a TV reality show host thinks now is the time for him to seize his moment. I put those pictures up more just so you can see how his hair doesn't seem to have changed all that much over a few decades. And I think this quote from someone in the Trump campaign sums up his rationale for why he has run for president. America is losing, and Donald Trump's a winner. And if Trump becomes president, America will become a winner too. Because as most of us know about Americans, if there is something they want to be above all else, it is that they want to be number one. They want to be the winner, and they never want to lose. So that psychology has fed into the Trump candidacy. So when he declared in June 2015 and quite notoriously rode down the escalator of his building to deliver his announcement speech, people thought he was a joke. People thought this was one of those, it was yet another celebrity trying to be president. It was one of those comedians in Europe who tries to become Prime Minister of Italy or President of Spain. And he was viewed initially as a bit of a joke, as a bit of a sideshow, but one that would be around for a while, but seriously, no one genuinely thought he was going to be the president. But Trump had a lot of things going for him. He had the fact that the field was so congested, with so many different people wanting to be the Republican candidate, that in a field of upwards of 17 at one point, you only needed about 20% of the vote to win states. And if you have that small but loyal following, you're half the way there. The other thing that Trump has going in his favour is an ability to control the media at his whim. The picture you have on the screen here is one of Trump's key campaign styles, the live call into a television program. Now picture this, if you're a TV producer and you're trying to get the jump in terms of ratings over your counterparts on the other networks, and you've got Donald Trump wanting to call into your show, you're probably thinking, fantastic, I am going to get hundreds of thousands of people across the country tuning in to my morning show because I've got this guy who's probably going to say something controversial but is going to make for some great TV. The New York Times did some research to try and quantify how much this was of value to Trump. And they concluded that Trump was effectively getting upwards of $2 billion in free advertising. In a country that is so dictated by the amount of money in politics, having $2 billion of free media puts him so far ahead of anyone else from the outset. And meanwhile, you've got all those other candidates trying to be relevant, trying to make the case. And for a 70-year-old man, he doesn't do too badly with the Twitter. So I thought it'd be worth just to put up a few of the tweets of Donald across the last year or two. So in this one, he's mocking Rand Paul for being weird. This is a fellow politician, for that matter. This one about the Mexicans. We get the killers, the drugs and the crime, and they get the money. Wow, Jeb Bush, whose campaign is a total disaster, had to bring in Mummy to take a slap at me. Not nice. Why did Mitt Romney beg for my endorsement 4 years ago? This is the reference to Megyn Kelly, who was the Fox News journalist, who was quite pointed in her questions. So very, very harsh, very brutal. The kinds of things that we couldn't even conceive Malcolm Turnbull or Bill Shorten or Tony Abbott or Julia Gillard or Kevin Rudd saying about a person in the press. He does cut into the pop culture a bit as well. He suggested that Robert Pattinson needed to give Kirsten Stewart the flick. He keeps pursuing the birther candidacy, the birther movement. He has a go at Cher and proclaims that his wig or his hair is not fake, whereas something about her may not be authentic. Has a go at wind turbines. Has a go at a fellow candidate about their looks. But what this all means is that a man that was considered to be a joke, a man that people thought had no chance of being president, in a matter of months, from June 2015, where this graph begins, look at that light blue line shoot up. He became the leader straight away because he took advantage of the unique context available to him. And once he was in that position, he got to say he was a winner. If you listen to his speeches in the latter half of 2015, all it pretty much was saying was, I'm winning in the polls, and isn't Jeb Bush a little girl? And then people would laugh and say, yeah, you go Trump. And you can see how continually his support has grown. So the question we have to ask ourselves are what things have played to lead to that advantage. This map's a bit too dense to go into detail too much, but this is just to explain that the way the Republicans decide their elections suits Trump as well. If he wins 40% of the vote in a state like New York, he can win all of the delegates on offer. Whereas if Ted Cruz wins a state like Texas, he cannot take all of the delegates on offer. So he's taken advantage of the rules in the system too. And one of the fundamental things that I think cannot be discounted is the fact that he has absolutely no shame about the things that he says. The fact that he feels comfortable calling those two rivals of his, on the left, little Marco Rubio, and on the right, lion Ted Cruz, shows that a lack of shame, the fact that he's not an elected politician, means he's unbound by the rules. He plays to his own script. So what makes a Trump voter tick? I think this is something a lot of Australians question. They want to know what is it that can compel someone to vote for Trump. And a lot of the research that I've read has articulated these four key factors. Firstly, the vast majority of Trump voters did not go to college. And as a consequence, they have suffered from the changes to the global economy that rely on a great education. Secondly, they don't think that they have a voice in the political system. They don't feel like the politicians that represent them are actually like who they are. They feel like that it's an us against them battle. Them being either the Mexicans who are trying to illegally immigrate, the Chinese who are trying to take our jobs, or ISIS who's trying to bomb our cities. And they live in parts that are strongly connected with periods of racial resentment in the United States. So I'll briefly go through these graphs. On the left, that graph on the left, those columns on the left show that if you did not have a college degree, over the last 20 years, your prospects of employment went down significantly. And as you see, the more education you get, the more likely you are to prosper in today's economy. The people who vote for Trump are in that dark blue column. If you ask voters around America, do you think you have a voice in the political process? Do you think that the politicians in Washington look like you? If you say no, that is almost a perfect determinant that you are going to be a Trump voter. If you don't believe the politicians in Washington are like who you are, then Trump is your man. And I think that's something that he has tapped into so effectively. He also plays on the fact that the media, and the fact that he can exploit people's prejudices against the media and say, the media is awful, the media is biased. Listen to me, and I'm going to tell you the way forward. Because look at that, people have so much distrust of the media, particularly people who consider themselves Republicans. That idea of waging a war against the people that are threatening us. Probably the best example is Trump's stance against Mexican immigrants. And the fact that he wants to build this wall between America and Mexico and make the Mexicans pay for it. He hasn't really articulated how that's going to happen, but according to him, it's just going to happen. This map's probably the most unsettling thing that I've seen. The darker the red on the left, the stronger Trump's support is. On the right, the darker the red represents the greater likelihood of someone searching a racist term on Google. So you can see that there's a lot of overlap between someone's search history in terms of the kinds of things they're looking up on the internet and whether they vote for Trump or not. Now this is obviously not a perfect conclusion to make, but it does suggest that people who tend to have lesser views of minorities tend to vote for Trump more. And this map further reflects that idea that there's a great disparity between how minority populations vote and how the white population votes. And you might ask yourself, has this kind of thing ever been seen before? We need to go back to before the Great Depression, the early 20th century, to get a sense of when this previously happened. That we had a Republican president, a Republican candidate who went all in on the nationalist tendencies, advocated for protectionism to grow American industries, projected that idea of masculinity and strength and the idea of I'm the man for the moment. The men over there, Teddy Roosevelt, Warren Harding and Calvin Coolidge, were all Republican presidents in the early 20th century who fit this criterion. And needless to say, their actions potentially led to the Great Depression in the 1920s. This tweet from early this year, summed it up so well. And I think if you need to encapsulate why Trump is connected so strongly, it's this. All the other people wanting to be president, on the Democratic side and on the Republican side, say, Americans are angry and I understand. But what does Trump say? I'm angry because I'm like you. I've been fed up by the politicians in Washington for far too long. It's about time someone like us was in the White House acting in our interests. So put together, we've got a clear favourite for the Republican nomination. And if we look at the contests coming up in the next week in the northeastern states, Trump is likely to continue his dominance. The most concerning thing ultimately for me in the things that I've read is that this suggests that this could be an era of a concept of American authoritarianism. The idea of a single leader who's very powerful running the show, as opposed to a democratic, inclusive environment, the kind of thing that we proclaim to be crucial to our way of life here in Australia. And as you can see in that graph on the right, the more likely you are to prefer an authoritarian leader, the more likely you are to vote for Trump. And it's no wonder then that the Russians seem to like him so much. So this was a poll that was done last week and polled various countries around the world to say, if you could vote in the US election, who would you vote for? Probably no surprises why the Mexicans love Hillary over Trump so much. I think it's nice to see that Australia's a pretty solid anti-Trump force. But unsurprisingly, the Russians like Donald Trump. And the Russians love Donald Trump because he reminds them of Vladimir Putin, that authoritarian leader, that strong man, that main man in control is the leader of their nation. So what does it mean for America's political future? I think this is quite an alarming moment in America's political history. It gives license for more politicians to behave like Donald Trump. Because if he's been so successful, I can be successful by being rude to people, by mocking people, by saying it's their problem that your life is so tough. I'm not actually going to tell you how the problem's going to be solved, but I'm going to tell you there's a problem, and then we're going to fix it somehow. But you've got to start by voting for me. That suggests to me that we are entering a phase of American politics where we are going to see more candidates like Trump. And come January 2017, we could legitimately have Donald Trump taking the oath of office to become the President of the United States. This New Yorker cartoon just makes fun of the fact that he loves to embellish, he loves to praise himself, and the fact that he wouldn't just be any president, he'd be the best president. He'd be the president for all time in terms of his quality. This could legitimately happen, folks, and I would probably say it's not an impossible chance that he's the president. I'd probably say it's between 20 to 40% right now. And if we look at what he's been doing lately, by refining his message, toning it down, probably suggests he's really wanting to do this. And that means to me that we need to take him seriously. And as this Time magazine covered so perfectly, we've got to deal with it. So hopefully what I've given across to you today is a sense that this man is a legitimate contender for the presidency. And why and how he has come about to such dominance suggests a lot of concerning things for the future of the United States. And whilst you may question, why do we need to care here in Australia? What happens in America has an influence all around the world. And it is important that all of us, no matter how old we are, no matter where we live in the world, we have an awareness of what's going on in the United States. Because that makes us more empowered citizens and means that we can have a better say in the future of our world. Because otherwise, if we aren't engaged, if we aren't involved, someone like him could be our president. Thank you very much. If anyone would like to come ask a question, more than welcome to come forward.